Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the Reimagining Justice Conference. My name is Justin Terrell. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Justice Research Center. Just a quick few words about us. Our mission is to transform the justice system, and we believe that you do so through research, education, and policy. Uh, I'll talk more about our organization later on in the program. But right now, I'm really excited to join this conversation, to introduce this conversation. So anyone who knows anything about me knows that I started my career as a youth worker and working in education, that I've been working on juvenile justice issues for years. And as an organizer, a very wise young person once told me, you need two things in order to have a movement: young people and art. Well, you've seen the art from Lewiee Blaze that we've had today, and I'm excited to introduce this panel discussion to talk about young people. And hopefully we have some young people joining us, and I'm really excited to get some different perspectives from people we deeply respect, like Jamel Jackson and Malaika. But more so beyond that, I just want to say, when we talk about the difficult time that we're having in Minneapolis right now, or in the state of Minnesota right now, families are bearing the blunt of that, of what is happening. And those young people, the young people that normally wouldn't be in the streets, that are being overexposed right now, we need to have a conversation about that. And so I'm excited for this discussion. I'm excited for the folks you get to hear from. And I will just hand the mic over and say thank you, and thank you for joining us. For more information about the Minnesota Justice Research Center, please don't hesitate to visit MNJRC.org. I'll hand it over to our facilitators. Thank you.
Hey everybody, how y'all doing? My name is McCaleb, a member of N4, basketball player and a father. And this panel discussion we will focus on will be the impact of the justice system on the young people. Panelists will share their perspective on what youth are facing and how the system could be reimagined to address the public safety for young people. Particular focus on responding to the current conditions youth are facing under COVID-19 of the killing of George Floyd. So we have three panelists: Lewiee Blaze, aka Lewis McCaleb, a creator and a storyteller and a visionary, co-founder of N4 Collective. Jamel Jackson, entrepreneur, educator, coach, founder of C.E.O, Change Equals Opportunities, and Malaika Hankins, restorative facilitator and community strategy lead and legal rights center. And we will discuss trauma, identity, youth development, and policies and procedures. And so the first three questions for all panelists. So state who you are, what you do, and why. The second question, or no, I should just Well, who wants to go first?
I could go first since I'm right here. Yep. So peace and love, everybody. Named Lewiee Blaze. That's who I am, what I do. I'm a storyteller, visionary, creative, community organizer. And why I do this work is because I'm very passionate about the healing and transformation of our society. That's my internal mission. And I'll pass it off to Sister Malaika.
Thanks, Lewiee, and thanks, Lewis. My name is Malaika Hankins. I use she, her pronouns, and I work at the Legal Rights Center. We're a nonprofit public defense firm here in Minneapolis. I do this work because I believe really strongly in the power of community to support their young people, especially in times of crisis like the ones we're in now. And I think that through intentionally centering the voices of youth and communities, we can create a better system than the one that we currently have. So a lot of our work that we do at the Legal Rights Center in partnership with a number of different community organizations is around policy advocacy, especially in the juvenile justice space, both at the state and county level. I'm super excited to be here to talk a little bit more about that work that we're doing and to engage with the other panelists around the work that needs to happen in our communities. I'll pass it over to Jamil.
Thank you. Thank you all. Sorry. Thank you for having me. Again, my name is Jamel Jackson. I am the Executive Director of C.E.O, which stands for Change Equals Opportunity. We're a life skills mentoring program with focus on youth males of color 12 to 25 in the areas of education, employment, and life skills. I am also a consultant for the city of Minneapolis with focus on the Office of Violence Prevention. And why I do this work is because I was these youth. I was someone who was aimlessly walking around in the community trying to figure out who I was and what my purpose was. Found myself in some trouble, and through that, I was able to figure out who I was, motivated myself to become the man that I am, and now I want to focus on helping all youth find who they are. CEO also stands for me is teaching these young people how to be the CEO of themselves.
So the second question would be, what was your response to the murder of George Floyd this summer, and how has COVID-19 like kind of affected your daily activities?
Good question. For me, it had a tremendous effect. I mean, for our community to be able to witness it live as it was going on was very traumatizing for the youth that I serve. And following with the riots and the unrest and a lot of youth using this moment to kind of vent, if you will, through their actions, not necessarily knowing the words to use, was a pivotal moment for us and our organization to be able to show the youth how to use their voice and how to be active in other ways instead of being destructive and detrimental to our community, but how to reverse that and actually let their voice be heard. I think this is a prime time for our youth to get activated. This space right now where we're in, this powder keg, if you will, with city and state and COVID and everything is allowing for us to really have a voice and take our rightful place, if you ask me, on where we sit and our own legacy. So I think for me, again, it was a traumatizing moment, but we were able to use that and spin that to allow youth to have space to find their voice. COVID restricts us in terms of being able to meet face to face, but we're doing a good job with having Zoom meetings and conversation and allowing time for intellectual thought through this, so we can figure out how we're going to come out of this better once everything starts to come back to some sort of normalcy.
Malaika, would you mind going next?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I echo a lot of what Jamil has said. You know, our young people in our community were witnessing just like extreme violence at the hands of police. And then that impacted or compounded by the COVID-19 pandemic has just been like a really big concern for us as we're thinking about youth, especially ones who are currently involved in the justice system. So, I mean, with the beginning of the pandemic, our organization was doing advocacy with partners to really reach out to our system partners, to the court partners, to folks who are running facilities around the state to say, like, what are you doing to make sure that young people are safe? We know that here in Minnesota, the first COVID-19 outbreaks in correctional facilities was at the Red Wing facility where young people were. And so that's just been really scary. And I think as we're going into this winter, as cases are continuing to rise, there's a lot of concern that we all should have in our community about what the impacts will be on youth who are inside facilities. And also, as Jamil said, you know, youth and community who normally would be participating in sports or in person in school are able to go to, you know, club meetings and other places to do those normal adolescent activities now are, you know, lacking for those community resources. And as we're thinking about, you know, ongoing unrest, the George Floyd murder trial starting again or starting soon, like, I think we're going to witness a lot of young people experiencing and re-experiencing harm and trauma, which means that us as like the community has to begin to really think really strategically about what we're going to do to prepare and how we're going to be ready to show up for kids and families in the ways that they need us to.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to go ahead and echo both of those responses. Right. I say my instant reaction to the murder of George Floyd when I first saw the video, like literally I couldn't sleep. I saw the video at about 3 in the morning when I was getting ready to lay down and go to sleep. And I saw that video and it just completely threw me off. So my sleep went out the window. I stayed up all night and I just dealt with so many mixed emotions because I was triggered all over again. Because of course, this has happened plenty of times before. Like I believe like the statistic in the state of Minnesota is like it's been over like 193 police killings in the last 20 years in Minnesota alone. And just that ratio is outrageous. And then when we look at the specific number of Black and brown shootings, it's completely disproportional compared to other races and cultures. So understanding the life that we live on an everyday basis as a Black male, right? Like being pulled over by the police for no damn reason and them being disrespectful with us, trying to just really agitate us and get under our skin and really flex their authority. I done dealt with that so many times to where I don't even trust the system already. So when we see something like that happen, it's completely just traumatizing. My first response to that, what I did, now that I'm getting older and I'm learning more about healing and relationships. Honestly, I called a prayer warrior for me. I hit up one of my mentors and I asked for a prayer because that's what I needed. I needed to stay rooted in like some spiritual faith, right? And after I was able to do that, I received some guidance, and then it really helped me go out into the community and do something. So like to echo what Brother Jamil said, like me as a young person, my first mind was to be destructive. Like to be real, on the first day of the protest, and the first 3 days I was out there at the protest rioting. Honestly, I was one of those young people out there destroying the police, destroying the precinct and all of those things because we were just stuck in so much rage. But I quickly noticed that that was not a battle that I wanted to be a part of, like being hit with smoke bombs and tear gas all in the eyes and rubber bullets being shot at you. Like none of that was fun. And I began to get this mentality of like, we need to be more strategic in our approach and we can't be reactionary, right? But we must use different forms of activism. So then quickly after that, I began to organize community and we began to rebuild and provide food into the community for those that just lost resources due to COVID and all of these things that's been happening. So I really started to channel all of those mixed emotions and channel that anger and frustration and that energy and move it towards something positive, and then really stepped into that light of being an artistic person and a storyteller and performing left and right, because that's what was giving me joy. I just wanted to be able to perform for people and allow people to hear these stories and hope to heal them through the words. So that was my personal response to George Floyd's death and COVID-19 this summer. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you all for sharing that. I like the circle that we're going in, Jamil, Malaika, and Lewiee. So I think we start off with Jamil at the next question. So what role does the juvenile justice system play in the impact of general trauma?
Well, I mean, it plays a huge impact. I mean, if we're going to have an honest conversation, we have to talk about where policing started from, right? Which would be slavery. It's traumatizing to all of us, even men. I was having a conversation yesterday about this. I have a few friends, lifelong friends, that are police officers, and I was making an observation of myself, just thinking back of different conversations of when I meet them out with their family or friends, and they're in regular street clothes, versus even when I see them on the street but they're in uniform. My interaction is different. My tenseness is different. So even me as a Black man, 43 years old, that has been doing this work, I engage with police officers, with probation, with lawyers, right, judges. There's still this feeling of, am I in trouble, if you will, right? Kind of what you were just speaking to, Lewiee, about being pulled over by the police. It's just, there's this stigma that comes with it. And so I feel the justice system is basically just, perpetuates that slavery mentality through the system and what our youth are allowed to do or not to do within that system. So there's really not much growth going on in terms of character development outside of what they're trying to do for themselves, just because the environment doesn't allow for that. I think that we need to do some definite reforms that allow for that type of growth. If we're really going to talk about rehabilitation, then we have to be mindful of healing, right? The trauma conversations, what led to these situations that got you to this point. We need better diversion programs that are going to focus more on being intentional about having those conversations, not just being a drop-in place for these kids to come receive some services, but some actual one-on-one loving on, hugging, crying, right? Being vulnerable as adults to show them that we too are finding our way. And in my work, it definitely helps with building the relationships.
Absolutely what Jamil said. I think about generational trauma and where it starts in the youth justice system, and the fact that any interactions that young people have with the system in that adolescence period is just inherently going to be a traumatic experience. In Minnesota, kids as young as 10 can be arrested, cited, brought into the youth justice system. I mean, if we think about like who the 10-year-olds you have in your life that you love, right? Like those are babies. Those are like fifth graders, fourth graders, they're elementary school students. And can you imagine what that does to a person's brain to be arrested, to be handcuffed, to even have like a really violent, just at the basic level of violent interaction with a police officer at that age? And our state has said that that's okay, that we think that when you're 10, you deserve to have like very like harsh, intense, sometimes and certainly punitive consequences for the actions that you have that are often just a part of typical adolescent development. So I think that there's no way that we can like take away trauma from the youth justice system. And what we ultimately need is like a fundamental restructuring of the way that the system interacts with young people. It's not to say that there aren't like young people in our community who are causing great harm, right? But the question that Jamil asked, what has happened beforehand is really important. And what do you need to feel supported, to feel engaged in your community is like the other half of that question. And I don't think our system is currently answering that in the right way. So as a result, you have, these young people as young as 10, like I said, but, often the average age of youth justice involvement in our state is between 14 and 17. If you think about like the ways that our brain is developing at that point, like the kind of violent, traumatic interactions that you're having with system stakeholders are surely going to impact the way that you seek out employment in your future, the ways that you think about your worth and value in community, how you have healthy relationships, both with authority, but also with the people that you love in your family. And that's then just going to be passed on from generation to generation. So until we have like a real honest reckoning about like what we think we should do when harm happens, especially when it's young people who are doing it, I think we're going to continue to see this cycle and this generational trauma that you mentioned, Lewis, excuse me.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Malaika. Because I think that's very interesting, right? Understanding this, the science of the brain and how it's developing and the psychological aspect of it. And you would assume that since these professionals, if you will, or these state people that work with you, they should have the data and statistics and should know the psychological development of a brain and understand like, okay, the prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed to like early 20s, and all of these things that I done learned about, at least, and these professional people that's supposed to be working with us. So if you have these data and these statistics, because we all know that local government and these people are on their data and statistics, we all know they got track of that. So if we understand that, then why would we put a 10-year-old in the prison, in a cell? Like, it doesn't make any sense. I remember when I went to JDC and we was waiting on our court date, it was like a bunch of us in like the little holding cell, and it was a 9-year-old up in there. And like, I was 16 at the time. And like, I wasn't even thinking about me. I'm thinking about him. Like, he's 9. What is going on? So it's just completely ridiculous if you ask me. And I think that just happens because of a lack of understanding as well. Like, individuals that work within the system it's like a disconnect between them and the actual community that's being served. And to go what Brother Jamil said earlier about the environment, I want to share a quote that like, when the flower doesn't bloom, we fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. See, there's nothing wrong with us. Since birth, we are worthy of love. We are gifted. We deserve to live in peace and in freedom. But as we grow up, it's different things that we experience in this society between our people, places, and things that kind of like program us to think and act differently. That's not righteous to our true purpose. And I think the system just allows that to go on. And at the same time, it doesn't help because it really invokes fear as well. Like a lot of us are already stuck in survival mode from financial devastation, family separation, and then the trauma that happens, even understanding that like a lot of this is genetically passed down through us, through our ancestry and the things that the folks before us had to deal with before we can even get to this point, right? Like I'm very grateful for where we're at as a people now. I see the progression that we made, but we still got a long way to go. And I think that we can get there very sooner if the masses could begin to lead with love, right? Have tough conversations, but do it out of kindness and out of curiosity, and simply have better understanding of each other, and everybody has a story to tell. And being open to see somebody else, I think is very important. And I think the system doesn't do a good enough job of that just yet. So, yeah.
Yeah, powerful. I realized one of them. So the next question is, have you or anyone you know had experience with the juvenile justice system? You can start off at Jamil.
Yeah, I did when I was younger. I'm parentless from the time I'm 15. I'm the oldest of 6. So at 15, I was, put in a position to be responsible for my household, so for my brothers and sisters. I actually, I worked at Target and a video update at the time. And back then I was making $4.25 an hour at each job, which obviously wasn't enough to pay the bills. So I had to do what I had to do. Well, I ended up getting caught and arrested for stealing from Target. And I was 16. I was a pretty big kid. I remember the officer, he was a nice guy. The original officer was, but when he got me down to the precinct, he didn't handcuff me. He just put me in a car. I mean, it was no big deal. I agreed to what I did. But as soon as I walked into the precinct, that whole atmosphere changed, right? So then it became, put that dude, what did they say? Put that guy in handcuffs, make sure he's handcuffed. The officer was like, well, he's only 16. We don't give a damn how old he is. You see how big he is? So that started it. And then it was the perception of when I got my caseworker to come in and talk to me and my family about what we were going through and all that. It wasn't about helping us heal or helping us fix. It was about tearing my family apart. It was about, oh, well, your parents can't take care of you, so let's take your brothers and sisters and move them here and move them there. And in terms of the system, it was basically, they just pegged me as a criminal at that point. I had to fight long and hard to get that stigma removed from my name. But just in the initial state, there was no questions of why I was in this situation, why I did what I did. It was simply, you did something wrong, you're a criminal, now you have to go through the system, and this is how you pay it back.
I don't have personal experience with the youth justice system, but I have, 2 younger brothers who are young Black men who've had significant experience with the system. And in my work today, I do a lot of policy work, but a lot of also just like direct work with young people, especially the restorative work. We partner with school districts and with other community organizations to facilitate repair of harm dialogues and circles and conferences for young people when there's been harm, as a means of either diverting from the system or just hoping to push the system in a better direction. And through that, I think we hear a lot of similar things to what you experienced, Jamil, just like a total lack of humanity and understanding of who this young person is, lack of questioning of what they need, and also like what they want to do, right? If someone maybe had asked you in that moment, what do you need? What do you feel about what happened? How would you want to repair this harm? I'm sure that you would have come up with a solution that was infinitely better than being locked away, than having whatever punitive consequences that the court wanted to give to you. And ultimately that would have restored your relationship, like with the rest of your community, with your family, right? Like, I think we as people, as Lewiee was saying, like we have this capacity for love and we have the solutions within us. Sometimes I think what we need is for the system to step out of the way and allow us to do that healing for ourselves.
Absolutely, absolutely. I share very briefly. Yeah, I have my own experience with the juvenile justice system as well. But I would like to share something about me before that point. Right, when I was young, I remember being young and knowing I was a star. Like I've always had this brilliance and this creative energy, and I've always felt happy about myself when I can imagine and just create, right? And just be myself in my own world, if you will. And that's what living like a kid again is all about. Like I know a lot of people here will probably want to live like a kid again, right? Because like young people, like children, they're not stressed about what's going on in the outside world, or they're not worried about having to make a paycheck and these different things. Like they're literally like the closest to their divine self, and that spirit is really moving them. And I love working with children. I love being around them because they give me so much life. And I just be thinking about their future, like, man, when they get more understanding and start to comprehend what's going on in their surroundings, like I hope they can really push through and not allow things to hold them back. So like elementary school, I was always great. Middle school, I had all A's my entire middle school career, like straight A's. I didn't get my first like F until sophomore year of high school. And why was that? It's because things began to change for me. Life at home, like Brother Jamil shared, I too had to step up and be a man of a house at the age of 16, right? And do other things. And then it started to kind of like deter me away from school, because school began to become irrelevant for me at this point. If I'm being quite honest, and like the things that really kept me in school and high school was basketball and the arts. Like those were the things that made me come back, because those were things I was passionate about. I felt like I had a purpose in those things, and everything else surrounded in the education system wasn't really connecting me to my why. So I felt like it was a irrelevancy within that. So then what had happened, the school that I was in, what did they do? They took away the arts of the school. So then I just had basketball. But after basketball season, I was like F school. If I'm being honest, like why am I coming here, waste of time when I could be out here getting money and taking care of my family? So that's where my mind was at. So I began to drop out, to be honest, in like sophomore year. And then that summer transitioning to my next year, I actually committed an aggravated robbery and got sent to JDC. And I was looking at 5 years because the state wanted to try me as an adult at the age of 16. And that was crazy. Like that put me in so much fear when like my public defender told me, you literally, you looking at 5 years. Like she ain't really, my connection with her was like, well, my experience with her was like, she ain't want to get to know me as a person. Like I was just this number on a piece of paper and she was just there to do a job, but I was, by the grace of a higher power, and just being able to get another chance, I was able to qualify for the ERC program and like house arrest for like 6 months, but probation. And I was on EJJ probation, extended juvenile jurisdiction. So I had to stay on probation from 16 all the way to the age of 21. And I literally had the 5 years dangling over my head though. So if I would have did anything, if I would have violated my probation, I would have been going to jail. You feel me? So I thought about all of those things and potentially not graduating and like all of those things. It really made me identify what my purpose is. And I had to basically save myself because the system wasn't doing it. At that moment in time, I felt like my family wasn't going to do it. So at an early age, I had to find that power within. But the reality of that is like, not everybody is cut like that. It's a very, very hard transition to get to that point mentally. And I'm just grateful to have good examples that I could see in my life who were able to change their narrative and pretty much follow those footsteps and find some inspiration in a very, very dark place. So yeah, I wanted to share that backstory because it just shows that like, don't nobody wake up and just want to be bad. Like, don't nobody want to wake up and commit a crime. It's usually the situation that we're in. I was speaking with somebody, my cousin yesterday. He shared a quote that was very powerful. He said, he said, people do the bad thing. He said, most people that do bad things are for the right reasons.
Right.
And that it just connected so deeply because it's so true. Like we out here trying to make a way. And at the end of the day, we gotta begin to foster trust with each other, foster community, and foster voice, and be able to control our narrative. So yeah, thank you. That was a good one.
Okay. So the next question, I have Malaika start on this one. Is there anything you see like working right now in the juvenile justice?
I think this is a good question because as people who like want to change the system, I think we can get caught up in a lot of the negative. I'll say a couple of things I think are working right. There is a decent spirit of collaboration, I feel, between different people in the justice system, on the youth side at least. In the adult system, it's a much more adversarial system where it's the judge versus the versus all these other stakeholders, prosecutor versus defense. And while that does exist in the youth justice space, the system stakeholders will say we all are working towards a common goal of supporting these kids. I think too, what we see in the youth justice system is that there are a lot of really great like youth workers and like individual people working with kids, be those like people in community doing the work, or even like system people like like probation officers and like certain attorneys and things like that. I think there are a lot of people who get in this work because they like deeply care about young people in our community and want to do right by them. They just get stuck up in the bureaucracy of whatever their positions are and the limits of what they're allowed to do. The last thing I'll say is I think we're in this like national moment, really sparked by George Floyd's murder. But, the last few years, there's been a lot of talk more about, mass incarceration and what that means, or just thinking differently about how we deal with legal issues in our communities. So I think that there's like this moment of opportunity where we're in this window right now where we can really push forward some really important changes to the system. And I feel like there are some folks on the inside who are receptive to hearing that. Should I go to Jamil next and then go the other way?
Yeah, I guess I would agree with everything you just said. For me, I'm more on the grassroots side, on the community side, so I don't necessarily go into the juvenile justice system as much. And so I deal with the kids once they get back home. So I can agree with you on that. And just in terms of the probation officers that I have conversations with, they seem really genuine to try to help some of these young men get back on the right path, are willing to allow them some minor hiccups that don't necessarily they won't violate their probation because of it, because they understand some of the circumstances that they're going through. I just think that we overall as a community, we need to do a better job from a community standpoint of one, how do I word this? Being visible, being present during time of incarceration, building relationships with these young people well before their intended release date, so that they know that they're coming home to love and some opportunity, right? And that will alleviate a lot of that stress that they're going through as they're getting closer to release date. I've talked to some young people who actually reviolate because they don't want to come home because there's nothing to come home to but more violence and hurt. And so I just see us, as you said, Malaika, with the George Floyd situation, we have prime time to really focus and hone in on how we can better these systems and these resources for these youth. And I'm really applauding the conversations that are going on right now that can spark this change.
Most definitely. Applauding those conversations and being on I think events like this is important, especially when it's organized with true intention. I think that form of work is moving in the right direction. I also think, like Malaika said, there are individuals that work within the system who do have pure intentions and truly do want to make a change in their own right. It's just the politics of the industry that really causes some barriers at times. But I do see some people working. I actually would like to highlight a specific individual, Charles Williams. He's a probation officer over in Hennepin County. That was my EJJ probation officer, my third one, actually, because I was fairly a good person on EJJ. And when I received him, it was another person that I could relate to. He was the first probation officer that had a real conversation with me, that like got to know me, like forget what's on the paper type deal, like what's up about your life. And that right there, that connection is what I needed as a young person. And he saw the brilliance in me and just always like, instead of like micromanage me and like just being up under my neck about certain things, he was more curious and asked a lot of questions about my purpose and like my future and my goals, and really kept me inspired and motivated in that way. So like individuals like Charles, I think that is something that is working right in the juvenile justice system, right? And yeah, that's what I would have to say to that question right there. Oh, well, actually, I do want to include though. I know I'm a young Black male. I share my experience, but somebody did include in the chat to not forget about the young Black women that are a part of this juvenile justice system as well, right? This is not just a gender-focused thing. We understand that this is all across the board, you know, for men and women. So I wanted to highlight that. That was a great point that they brought up. Most definitely, we cannot forget about our young women as being a part of this system. Yeah.
Okay, so we just got a question from our audience. Her name is Stephanie, and the question is, how do you think current distance learning arrangements and the pandemic are affecting the youth at risk of entering? Let me read that again. I like that. How do you think the current distance learning arrangements and the pandemic are affecting youth at risk of entering the juvenile justice system? And what can the public do to support the youth right now in this pandemic? I mean, anybody that wants to start, you can go ahead.
I guess in a roundabout way, so to speak, the pandemic is kind of helping keep some of our youth out of the justice system because of the COVID cases and keeping those low. So if these youth aren't committing violent crimes and they're kind of getting, you know, a court date and a slap on the wrist, if you will, that's one piece of it. I guess the other piece from a community standpoint, I think it's prime time for us to step into the gaps. Like, I mean, our kids, we're able to spend more time with our kids than ever, right, with distance learning because they're in our homes. And so I'm focusing with my youth and the parents that I mentor is, how do you build relationships? How do you have engaging conversations that allow for intellectual stimulating growth, right? How do you take this time to share in some of the whys that our kids are unfamiliar with? And when I say why do you do certain things? Why don't you do certain things? A lot of times as parents, we just say, right, don't or do. And we don't give the understanding of the why, which helps in the development. And so I think that being visible in the community, especially for myself and my team, just being visible and being there, because a lot of our homes, on the good side, as I said, COVID is stopping some of these kids from going to juvenile, going down that route because of some of the things that they're doing, but it's also creating a lot of stress in the home because parents are spending a lot more time with kids that they're not normally spending time to. They're kind of used to their kids being at school. So there's some other stress levels. There's the economic piece that comes with it. And so again, it's just important for us to be as visible as possible, as open as possible. Sometimes I just ride the streets engaging youth, whether I know them or not, and seeing what their issues are, their barriers, and how can I support, because I understand, right? Being cooped up in the house with mom and dad for 24 hours isn't ideal for anybody. So again, just being present and being out there as a community, we have to do a better job of grabbing arms and locking these youth into our circle of into our net, if you will. So no matter what direction they go, no matter what conversation they're trying to have, it all leads back to the same, which is uplifting each other.
the other way that youth are being kept out of this system during the current pandemic is also because they're not in school, and that like school to prison pipeline that it's kind of like buzzed around about is very real. And like the first point of interaction with many young people with the system is through like interactions they have with officers in their school buildings. And so we're seeing like a really significant decrease in that because kids aren't physically in school. I think the other piece that I would add, I love what Jamil said about just like being out in community, wrapping arms around our young people, reaching out to the families and the youth that we know. I think the other piece too is that we just have to keep public pressure on our system right now and refuse, one, to like let up any vigilance on what's going on inside of our system, especially within youth correctional facilities. Like I said earlier, like we're going into what could be like another really big outbreak within Department of Corrections facilities and county run facilities as well, like we saw at the beginning of the summer. And that could just be, fatal for some kids in our community. And that's just not acceptable. So as a community, we have to say like, we're holding our systems accountable to keeping those folks who aren't at home with us safe in those facilities. And also that coming out of this pandemic, we want to see a significant shift in the way that the system is run. I think we would lose just a brilliant opportunity we have right now if we allow our system to go back to the status quo and we just reopen and say, okay, well, everything was working fine before, so we want to get back to normal. But instead of pushing for normal, we should push for better, for excellence, for what Lewiee was saying, a system that's really rooted in love. And I think we have that moment to do it now.
Most definitely, most definitely. Yeah, the time is now. It's now or never. Honestly, that's the mentality. And I would like to touch on that aspect of like just the distance learning in the pandemic and how it's affecting the youth. I really like what Brother Jamil said about like, you actually highlighted a couple positive things as well within like being home, because a lot of us, we work so much, we always doing things, but to be forced to be at home, and actually spend that time. I know people that like we done had conversations and we all could relate on being able to like get to know our family more. Because like it all starts at home. Like even me, I've been able to grow with my mother more as well. Like earlier in the pandemic, I was living with my mother, and we were able to have more conversations and just to start to address some of our past experiences. But it's because we were forced to do so. But on the flip side of that positivity, like the good things that could come out of that being home, at the same time, there are some people who are not blessed with having a mother anymore. Like there are some people who truly feel like they don't have a place to call home, right? Some people still in toxic environments, honestly. And I acknowledge that because, like I said earlier, everybody got a story to tell. And a lot of us are like walking around feeling down and overwhelmed with mistakes that we probably had made, people who done stabbed us in the back, just these traumatic experiences. And then when we don't understand those things and don't learn from those, and we go out into the world without even knowing it, subconsciously, we're bringing that energy to others that we interact with. So then it becomes this cycle of like hurt people, right? And that's something that we most definitely should work on. So I'll say what the public can do to help support. One, I want to say we need to collectively invest into initiatives like C.E.O, right? And stuff that brother is Jamil doing, because you're actually activating like people who are actually creating solutions. Identify those people and find out how you can support those people directly, because it's people that's out here doing the work, and we're doing the work because it's within our purpose. And we're not going to wait for no system. We're not going to wait for no grant. We're not going to wait for anything to do this. We're going to make it happen. But those that feel like they could do something more or want to help out, get informative, do your education, understand like the lay of the land, and find out those people in the communities that are activating, and join forces and come together and let's do this work and help amplify the work, I would say. And then I'm a big creative person. Right now, I've been utilizing my artistry as activism and coming up with virtual ways to engage people, right? and just really pushing a lot into my creativity and the content to get it out to folks and hopefully touch people through the music, through the videos, through something like that. So like the youth work that we do at N4 and the creativity that we create, like if the public could help out with that as well, like help us amplify our work, right? Get us connected to some platforms that would push it out to the masses and really get this message of self-determination, this message of empowerment, this message of healing and transformation out to the world, and try to touch people's hearts and touch people's ears virtually and connect in any way we could, because there are some people who will be in their own silo, will be in their own box in this pandemic. And those are the people I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about those people that feel like they're alone. How can we find them and let them know that they are not alone? So, yeah.
All right. Next question will be from the audience. Her name is Katie. She says, "What does a perfect justice system look like to you?"
So I was just answering that in the chat. But I'd say for me, what I was going to say is I don't think that there is a such thing as a perfect justice system. I think that there are multiple entities at play. I do believe in systematic oppression. I believe that the justice system is a part of that. And so for reasons we'll never perfect that, if you will. I think that if we can change the lens to stop looking from a criminality standpoint and a mental health standpoint and generational trauma standpoint, that a lot of these kids that are getting locked up wouldn't be. They can be diverted to diversion programs. They can, be relocated to different environments that help for mental growth and give peace of mind, if you will. I think that we need wraparound services. I think that we need to create a resource center. It's something that I'm working on now with our city council and our mayor's office, to create a resource center that it is kind of a all one stop shop, if you will. So it needs to house all of our grassroots organizations, because even as good as I think I am, I can't reach every youth, right? So I need those other grassroots organizations to be present to help with the other youth that aren't flowing with me, or I'm not flowing with them for one reason or another. I also think that we need to put emphasis on intellectual stimulation more so than we do athletics. I think that that's a driving force in the criminal world for our youth. They get to a point where they're not the superstar anymore, and because we haven't developed their mind outside of athletics, then they feel like there's nothing else for them to turn to, so they turn to crime. And so I think really being more engaging, that we need more of a quest program. I know there used to be it used to be called Explorers Posts, where there was internships and job shadowing opportunities for youth to get an understanding of what career fields are possible for them. They're limited in their access to that in school and in community, because they only know what they see and what they hear. And so if you're only in specific classes that and those teachers are giving you the time to actually explore those pieces, then you're limited. In your household, if your economics is low, then you're not vacationing, you're not taking trips, you're not seeing things in that respect. If us Black men aren't being out and being visible, being vulnerable and being an example to show what real life looks like, and not just from a perspective of economics, but from a perspective of a husband, from a perspective of a father, a brother, a mentor, then again, we're still limiting access to these youth, male and female, on who they can become, who they can turn to in their times of need. So they're not taking that next step to commit a crime for whatever reason they may be doing it.
It's such a privilege to keep going second. And just to echo everything that you're saying, Jamel, I think I'll just add a different layer to this. I think the way that we start to get there is just shooting really big. There are places around the country who have decided that the way that their justice system, their youth justice system is currently working just isn't acceptable anymore. So places like Seattle have said they're aiming towards 0 youth detention in the next 5 years. They've just made that as a goal, and their whole community is wrapping around it, and that's what they're working towards. And I think that sort of really big, bold, visionary work is what we need to do in order to get to that better system. And that better system, it would be one that is rooted in community and supporting families and responding appropriately to the needs of young people. And that ultimately is just efficient and lean. I think about, the small town in North Carolina where my dad grew up. And when he was like wilding out in the streets as a kid, like it was just like the old church ladies who came and got him and like put him in his place and like connected him back to his school and all of those sorts of things. And I think we've just built up this system that's way too big, and ultimately like the individual youth, their needs get missed. And so if we can pare down the system and instead put those resources in supports in place for community to step in, I think that that's my vision of what the perfect system looks like.
Yes.
Amen.
Snaps.
Amen.
I say, sis.
Amen.
It's crazy you mentioned that church story actually, because I feel like my response was similar in a way. I want to include that the person, Miss Katie Cunningham, who asked the question, she did put in parentheses with unlimited resources, and I would like to touch on that. And I would like to say, let's forget about the money. Like, let's imagine a world without the money. What would we be doing? Like, if resources and if money, if that didn't exist, that material object, if you will, that tool, what if that wasn't around? What would we be here doing? Like, how would we be helping each other? I'm a firm believer that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And in that sense, we all can relate. As long as you can wake up and you can breathe, right? We can go into this world and we have the ability to create, we have the ability to connect, and once we understand that power as individuals and we combine forces with others and collaborate, we find a place of peace in that, and a sense of unity. And I think that's what we should work on more, is like not being restricted to materialistic things, or worrying about money or other issues, like these boxes that we just get put into. I think it's time for us to think without a box, if you will, get out of that bubble, and really transcend. So yeah, that would be my response. I don't believe there's a perfect system. I really can't, well, I can imagine anything, but I would like to say that, yeah. I think it's time for us to get back to ourselves and really get in touch with our divine power that we have within, and that's just my personal belief.
Great discussion. My name is Lewis McCaleb again, and so this moment right here, we got 5 minutes left. Well, briefly, like 3. So we was just gonna use these 3 minutes for like any closing remarks anybody had. Like, we can start off with 2.
Sure. Yep. I would say Sarah Davis, she asked an amazing question here. We aren't able to get to it, but maybe we can like send it in the chat or something like that. So thank you for sending that question. And for my closing remarks, I would just say it is time for us as a people and as a community to go from I can't breathe to we will breathe. It's time for us to acquire a new mentality and start to change our actions and behaviors and step into this world as more positive and more productive beings of light in this universe. That's my final thought.
All right, thank you all. That was amazing. I'm sure everyone really enjoyed that. And now we're going to go back into that main session where we started the day again. I have in the chat included that link, so if you all can just jump onto that, we'll see you on that end. Thank you all.